Hello girls, today I shall teach you the second poem of our syllabus, and that is Meeting at Night by Robert Browning. Girls, it is said that Meeting at Night is one of the finest literary works of Robert Browning. But before going into the analysis of the poem, I would like to give you a brief account of the poet Robert Browning. This is our poet Robert Browning, and he is one of the finest poets in the Victorian era. Now let us find out about the poet himself. Robert Browning was an English poet and playwright whose mastery of the dramatic monologue made him one of the foremost Victorian poets. His poems are known for their irony, characterization, dark humor, social commentary, historical settings, and challenging vocabulary and syntax. He was born in Walworth in the parish of Camberwell, Surrey, in South London on 7th of May 1812. He died on 12th December 1889 at Venice, Kingdom of Italy. Robert's father, a literary collector, amassed a library of around 6,000 books, many of them rare. As such, Robert was raised in a household of significant literary resources. By the age of 12, Browning had written a book of poetry which he later destroyed when no publisher could be found. By the age of 14, he was fluent in French, Greek, Latin, and Italian. He became a great admirer of the Romantic poets, especially Shelley. His notable works were The Ring and the Book, Fra Lippo Lippi, My Last Duchess, The Pied Piper of Hamelin, and many more. His first published work, Pauline, a Fragment of a Confession, was formally a dramatic monologue. Men and Women, which was published in 1855, was a collection of 51 poems. Robert had established his career first as a poet and then as a playwright. His unique ideas added a lot to the literary world. His works won global recognition marked by elusive imagery, symbolic structures, dramatic monologue, a blend of dark humor and irony. He makes not only striking revelations of human passions and aspirations, but are also valuable passages of ethical teaching which turns him an inspiring force. One finds no conventionality in his poems. That is why the mind of the reader is always engrossed in something or the other. One has to dive into the depth of his writings to know the actual meaning. Thus, due to these traits, he is considered a prominent writer of the Victorian era. So girls, this was about the poet Robert Browning. And now we will go into the introduction of the poem that we are concerned about in our syllabus, Meeting at Night. Let us find out. Meeting at Night is a Victorian English love poem by Robert Browning. The original poem appeared in Dramatic Romances and Lyrics, written in 1845, in which night and morning were two sections. In 1849, the poet separated them into the two poems. One is Meeting at Night and the other one is Parting at Morning. Okay, so there are two phases of this poem. The poem was written during the courtship period of Robert Browning with his future wife Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Later she became Browning. Okay, the poem is written in two stanzas of 6 lines each. So this is a poem, as you can well understand, is a poem of 12 lines. The first stanza describes the excitement of a secret journey by a boat on the sea. The second stanza, however, describes the joy of the meeting of the two lovers. The main theme of this poem is the urgency and desire for the lover to meet the beloved. This poem also shows the dichotomy between the beauty of art and the action of life. You cannot enjoy both nature and go on with life at the same time. It's either one or the other. Like its sister poem, Parting at Morning, which uses pronominal reference to attribute the gender of the person in the boat, the poet never reveals the identity of the two lovers. It follows the rhyme scheme A B C C B A D E F F E D. Girls, in this poem, Meeting at Night, the poet has used a number of colors. Okay, he has a mastery of creating images, and that we will find in this poem also. He has given us a picturesque view of that beautiful night full of emotions. Okay, a number of colors. Let us find out from the very first line of this poem. The grey sea and the long black land. Black land. Okay, why black? Everything in the night, girls, seems to be dark and black. So, according to the poet, the sea is grey and the land is far stretched in front of his eyes, and that is black. So, the usage of two colors, grey and black. Then comes, and the yellow half moon, large and low. Let us see the photo of such a moon first. So this is our moon, large, low and yellow. And let us find out what more the poet says about this moon. Then comes, and the startled little waves that leap in fiery ringlets from their sleep. So according to the poet, as he was in the sea, all the waves were very excited. They always go into the sea and come back and thrush themselves on the beach. They are startled by the low and large moon, because as we know that with the gravitation force of the moon, the waves, we get high tides and low tides. So this is also implied in these two lines. In fiery ringlets, this fiery ringlets is an imagery that is formed for us to understand that whatever emotion and feeling was there in the heart of the lover, it was just beyond imagination, and it leaped like fiery ringlets. It was beyond the limit of excitement. As I gained the cove with pushing prow. Cove means the narrow cave, and prow means the front portion of a boat. and he was rowing the boat, he was pushing the prow and quench its speed in the slushy sand. Now in this line, girls, one thing I want to tell you, that there is the repetition of S sound. I will just repeat the line. Please notice. And quench its speed in the slushy sand. So I hope you notice the repetition of a single sound, and that is the S sound. This is known in English language alliteration. Okay, repetition of a particular sound in a line is called alliteration, and it is a very important figure of speech in English language. Okay, so here we get the first 6 lines of this poem, and I hope you understand that the lover is very much excited to meet his beloved. He is on the sea, he is rowing his boat, and above him is the large yellow moon, which is, motivating the lover to row his boat faster and get on to the other side of the fields and the land and meet his beloved. So these are the first 6 lines of the poem. Okay. See, in the next 6 lines of this poem, altogether we will rather visualize a picture in which we can see that the lover is rowing the boat and he has crossed a long land, then a mile of warm sea-scented beach. He has crossed this also, okay? 3 fields to cross till a farm appears, and he has crossed a long stretch of land. 3 fields, okay? Long stretch of land, and ultimately and finally he appears to a farm that was far away from his place. This is the picture of the lover rowing the boat faster under the moon in the night. And this is the picture which shows that the lover has rowed his boat on a long distance in the sea, and here he has left his boat and is crossing the fields. And then he finally appears to a farm, and there we can see a house which is supposedly the house of his beloved. And then finally, as I showed you in the picture, he had crossed the 3 fields and he has appeared to a farm, and then he moves into the house. He was standing at the door. A tap at the pane. He knocked at the door. The quick, sharp scratch. And he was just standing outside the window pane. And he tapped the window pane. And from inside, he could see, from outside, he could see that somebody inside was scratching a match stick and blew spurt of a lighted match. And then it was ignited a flame with that lighted match. And a voice less loud through its joys and fears than the 2 hearts beating each to each. And then the door was open. The lover went inside. They spoke, the 2 lovers spoke in an inaudible voice rather, with their joys, excitement, and also fear of getting caught by the other people outside. And their hearts were beating each to each. Only they could hear their heartbeats. So this was how, this is the apparent meaning of the lines of this poem. Okay, girls, so I hope you have understood the meaning of the poem, and now I shall give you a detailed analysis and explanation of the poem once again. So as we see, the speaker is at sea, heading towards the black land in the distance. He briefly paints a picturesque image of night at sea, but moves forward until he pulls his vessel up onto the sand. He walks a mile along the beach and then across 3 miles fields until he approaches his goal, a farm. He taps at the window, sees the lighting of a match, and then is overwhelmed by the beating of his and his lover's hearts as they reunite. So we see that the entire poem has a sense of movement to it that reflects the speaker's desire to reunite with his love. Okay? Yes, we see a sense of movement from the very start of this poem. The poem's meter and sound clearly denote a sense of pressing intent. The first stanza, as we have seen alone, begins with and, okay, as though to suggest that what is on the speaker's mind is never the moment he is in, but rather the next thing, since the later gets him closer to his lover. Technically, the meter is iambic tetrameter, though it is hardly strict as should be expected in a poem that puts movement over order and contemplation. This sense of movement, girls, is particularly interesting when compared to what is usually expected of a poem of this sort. The imagery, especially in the first stanza, is extremely picturesque and pastoral, the type of landscape that readers often expect poets to spend time contemplating and describing. Poetry, after all, often attempts to capture the complexities and beauty of particular moments, diving deeply into one image to discover all of its profundity. The speaker, however, is uninterested in the magnificence of the yellow half moon, large and low, as we have seen. Instead, his focus is on bypassing such elements of nature so as to get to the beach, so that he can get to the fields, then he can get to the farm, and ultimately he can reach up to his beloved. Now, the message here for Browning seems to be that he chooses life rather than art. This is very important and very interesting to note, that the poet chooses life rather than art. That for him the goal is movement and energy rather than static contemplation. But when the speaker arrives to his love, the poem abruptly ends. Okay? This is a matter of fact, this is a point to be noted, girls. Yes, that we have seen that the two lovers have met in the farm, in a house, and all of a sudden the poem ends here. The fact that attainment itself does necessitate a third stanza can imply into one of two things. Either we can believe that the next action would be further movement of this sort, or we can believe that once he has attained his happiness, he has no further need for writing more. So he has achieved the unspeakable beauty of love, but as we see in the poem, he as a speaker is not interested in plumbing the depths of beauty. Therefore, once he achieves such beauty and happiness for himself, he need not write, but rather than can simply live. So it's worth noting the implications of secrecy in the poem. Okay, so let us first understand what is the secrecy maintained by the poet in this poem. First, the journey and reunion happen at night. Okay, suggesting a veil of transgression that in the Victorian era or age would likely to be linked to sexuality. Perhaps there is autobiographical impetus in exploring the theme from this angle, considering that Browning had only recently wed Elizabeth Barrett Browning after a courtship that they had to keep secret from her oppressive father. Many scholars see in it a representation of this courtship, though Browning's general eschewal of autobiography in his poetry makes it hard to imagine he would pursue that so explicitly. So girls, not only is sexuality implied in the clandestine meeting, but the image of the boat charging into the beach, where it can quench its speed in the slushy sand, is easy to interpret as a metaphor along these lines. So I hope you have understood this whole poem, girls. Overall, the poem is not subtle in its themes, the speed with which it can be read, since it is only 12 lines long, is the final implication that for he who loves, there is no cause for stopping to admire surrounding beauty, at least not until the supreme beauty of his beloved can be realized. So this is all about your poem, this beautiful poem, Meeting at Night. I hope you have well understood the meaning that is lying deeply in between the lines, and I hope you have well understood the overall feeling and emotion of the poet himself. That's all, and thank you.